Everyone else had blue rings. So we put people on oxygen supplementation. And then this blue ring, boy, it went away quick. The blue ring went away with the oxygen supplementation to the body. And then it would come back again when the oxygen was not being utilized as a supplement. Now this got my attention. So in 1990, fall, and 1991 in Rarotonga, we did a lot of work with this because people were getting the blue rings then. But we didn't worry about it because, we've got it under control. Because now with the oxygen supplementation, the blue ring goes away, the viruses go away, the parasites go away, the cancers go away. I'm happy. Today, if I give the same amount of oxygen that I gave in 1991 to people, the blue ring is hardly even affected. Did I make my point clear? I have to go from 20 units or drops of stabilized oxygen 3 times a day in a glass of water. I have to go to 40 drops of oxygen 3 times a day in a glass of water. I'm talking now about myself, to where that blue ring is diminished. And even though it is diminished in everybody, it is still there. And I frankly don't know of anybody who is free of that particular blue ring. And I've been looking at many, many people. Now, I'd like to have you, Peter, down in Melbourne. What's your opinion, sir? Pardon me? It's there in every eye. Who else has been looking? Linda, how about you? Everyone has it. I'm worried about this, folks, because this means then that we have to do more deep breathing exercises where we inhale and hold it there in yoga-type breathing, more definite, not necessarily aerobic-type exercises, which uses up a tremendous amount of oxygen anyway, but we have to do something to get the oxygen in our system so that we will be able to throw off this yoke, shall we say, of viruses and bacteria and parasites and cancer, leukemias and other things, which without that oxygen, we're in trouble. Now, I don't think you've heard me speak this way before with this much alarm, but right now the blue ring is not going away under what I would have called 5 years ago just conventional oxygen supplementation. So I want you to try to kind of check this sort of thing out. Because on one hand, if we take too much oxygen, in the past it was considered toxic. Okay? Are you with me on that, sir? It was considered toxic. More than 20 drops 3 times a day were considered toxic. You can work with your hydrogen peroxide. It's all in the hydrogen peroxide literature. You can work your way up to maybe 20 drops in a glass of water 3 times a day, and above that is more than the body can tolerate. What's true now? Has things changed so thoroughly that we need more oxygen in the system? And I believe this is true, but what I would probably want to do to be on the safe side is to take internally 2 different types of oxygen rather than limit myself to 1 type of oxygen. Now, I remember back in about 1991 with Anita, when she was on just a nice little program with a little bit of oxygen. She ups the oxygen, and then she passes these huge cancers out of her bowels. Now, how about other people who are on a limited program of 5 years ago? I'm afraid we've got a different situation on our hands now, folks, and I want you to look and experience and talk back and forth with one another on this oxygen problem. And I want you to help me on that, because I'm not sure I have all the answers on it. We're into a new ball game. More and more oxygen deprivation on the earth scene. Kyle, come up here. I'm going to have you talk about another matter. Now, Kyle, as an instructor, has been doing an awful lot of research on other things. And he's come upon something that we looked at quite extensively in a positive way maybe 15 years ago, and that is negative ions. And I'd like to have Kyle, as far as you can, Kyle, give a condensed discourse on this matter.
I've been, where to begin? There's a fellow called Joshua Shore who has traveled around for about 28 years collecting research from different universities in many different parts of the world. Many different parts. I mean about 3 feet of published articles, you know. I've spent quite a few hours going through it. Now, we need to look at a few areas with ions. Some of them are very small particle size, and they move very, very quickly. Some of them are a larger particle size. They move very slowly because they're heavy. Now, when you go into a city with a lot of pollution, all of the small negative ions, like the kind that are produced around waterfalls, you know, that smell in the air, or in a rainforest, and that kind of smell that makes you kind of breathe deep and you just sort of relax and feel like living amongst the trees. Well, these negative ions, the small ones, hit all the little particles of lead and so on, and they all fall out of the air. And so in a very short space of time, all the negative ions are used up. They disappear in the first half hour of early morning traffic. And so then all you're left with are your larger positive ions. Now, they did studies on animals where they de-ionized the air. And between 20 and 30 days, all of the animals died.
Repeat.
They did studies on ions. They de-ionized the air that animals breathed, and between 20 and 30 days, the animals died. They also brought them to the point of asphyxiation, and then they negatively ionized the air at the same oxygen concentration, and they found that all of the symptoms of asphyxiation disappeared. The conclusion was that the negatively charged oxygen, when it diffuses through the lung lining, does so with much greater efficiency than if there's no charge. Did you understand that?
Repeat.
You take your oxygen atom with an extra, or your oxygen molecule with an extra electron on it, and have that come in up your nostril and go down through into your lungs, and it's sitting there on your lung membrane trying to go through the alveoli and into the blood. The transport mechanism seems to be dependent on the negative charge. So you get more oxygen going across when it's got a negative charge on it. Did you get it? Okay. So when I looked at the studies of the ion concentrations, there used to be a lot more small negative ions and medium-sized negative ions. The study, one particular one I'm thinking of, was in the Philadelphia area in the States. And there were, even back in the early 70s, I think it was 72, there was a higher predominance of negative ions to positive. It was 5 to 4. Since all of the studies after Chernobyl, the recent figures now are that the ions are 5 to 4 with the positives in front. And that's in a natural setting. You come into your cities, all the negative ions are completely gone. The pollution knocks all of them right out in the beginning of the day.
How would that refer to places like Sydney or Brisbane?
You'd have a very hard time absorbing your oxygen, breathing the air there.
What's your suggestion, sir? You've given us a problem, now give us a solution.
I don't know I have a solution. I need to research much more extensively. Joshua makes an ionizer. Now, it probably has a certain kind of a magnetic field coming off it, and you know, if he could get together with the people that make these things and do a bit of research, then we'd probably come up with something that was wonderful. But his number is 921522, if anyone wants to take it down. He makes an ionizer.
Give that number again slowly, please. Copy this down, everybody.
He's in the Gold Coast area. It's 55 in the beginning. 921522.
Name?
Joshua Shaw. Now he makes an ionizer. He spent 28 years in the field. He tells me that a lot of the ionizers that are, you know, you get your $70 ones, they pull the dust out of the air. That's true. They clean the air.
Up to 6 inches away.
Now, they clean the air. When they make, after a few months, the electrodes pit, and then they make medium-sized ions, and after a little while, they just sort of make fatter and fatter ones. But they don't make the small, highly mobile negative ions that are required biologically, that you get in your rainforests and so on, and around your waterfalls, where they've measured thousands and up to millions of your small negative ions. Now, I measured his machine with another $13,000 piece of equipment. It can measure medium to small, but not very small, ions, and up to 6 feet away, after about a 2-minute period where all the dust fell out of the air, the ion concentration shot up off the scale. Now, if you try doing that with a few of the other units, I don't think you get that result. I need to go and spend money on a few of the other units or borrow them and do it. Now, he also got a mass spectrometer. I haven't been able to get one of them because they're over $1 million. And so I haven't done that research, but he borrowed one, and it made millions of your very small negative ions that are very highly mobile. Now, you put someone with sinus condition, and they breathe that, and they have their chronic sinusitis, and the serotonin inflammatory pathways are stimulated from the positive ions, and they have this continual blocked nose. They go into a rainforest, or they go and breathe this air, and their nose unclears. And if they've got asthma, their bronchioles dilate, and their breathing gets easier. And you read the negative ion studies done with your asthma, and they breathe that for a while. They get an exacerbation, which they don't understand. That means all the symptoms get worse. Then all the symptoms in about, well, so we say 85 out of 87 people diminish, and much of the time disappear. And so it's quite possible that that exaggeration of the symptoms initially will constitute what we would call a healing crisis. And so there's some validity in this research that we could look into. And, you know, Joshua's got his research in there. Maybe you can talk with him, go read it. It'll probably take you a few months to get through it all. So you want to talk about rubber-soled feet and all that stuff? Okay, now you get this.
Just a moment, please. We have done our research back about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, on the negative air ionizers. And we had rooms like this where we take the wires that would go clear through the building, and we thought that we were getting a change with negative air ionizers. It would work up to around 6 inches around the particular wire, but what would happen is all this dust would literally drop out of the air and drop to the nearest physical object, like a wall or a floor or a ceiling. Now these things did work to get the dust out of the air, which would be wonderful for people who have asthmatic problems. Many of the hospitals in the United States, in each of the room, they have these negative air ionizers, but some of the best ones have only 12 inches away were effective for the changing, you know, the air to this negative charge, and to clean out all the oxygen out, or not oxygen, but all the dust out of the air where the stuff would drop out. Now, if this object can, that Kyle is speaking of, can do it, how far away, Kyle?
I measured it at 6 feet with the medium to small negative ions.
Now, if he can do it with 6 feet away, this is truly a very marvelous instrument. because to my knowledge it hasn't been done before that distance away. This makes it practical, so you don't have to sleep with your nose up against a device where it only gives the negative ions 6 inches away. You follow me? This is where you'd be in that area, and you'd get the negative air, the negative ions out of the air, which would help you with the conditions. People, it's a known fact that where you have the rooms in the hospital where people have your negative ions, that they heal much more rapidly because of the effect of its oxygen in the body, because of what Kyle has mentioned, that the body, the membranes in the lungs become more, shall I use the word permeable? Would that be correct?
Well,
to the oxygen molecule.
It may be that, or it may be the receptivity from the blood cells, because the thrombocytes also get a negative charge and stop their excessive clotting, and the blood clot problems go. So I'm not sure where the effect exactly is.
I'm not sure either, but the thing works. Now this is something I'd recommend that you all look into. You gently tell this gentleman that I don't know where he's coming from, I don't know what his background is. Just very gently inquire as to the information regarding this, and then if you can afford one, I know that you will not be disappointed if you can get negative ions away from that machine at least 6 feet. This will be a boon to help everybody's health, especially in a country where you have very, very serious asthmatic conditions.
I was listening to the radio and this negative ionizer actually came up, and I think they're about $600, but apparently if you're with one of the medical benefits people, some of them will refund up to 80% of the cost, and if you're not, you just need a friend who is.
Now, he's had to spend millions of dollars with the Therapeutic Goods Administration proving his device so he can get it listed on the Therapeutic Goods Act. He's had the packaging companies refuse or keep on stuffing up his order just ridiculously over and over, and it turns out that the major funding for the packaging companies comes from, their major users, their major profits are derived from the medical profession with the drug packaging. And, that's interesting. To make the ionizer make small negative ions consistently, he had to use gold in the circuitry. I've looked inside and played around with him and gone over all the different circuit boards from a bunch of different ionizers. And he has to use gold on his probe mounts so they don't corrode. And he used isonol bonding agent instead of glue so it wouldn't outgas to hold his circuit boards in place. And so he's had to go to a great deal of expense and a great deal of trouble, battling with legally and just to get boxes to sell his things in. Should I keep going on?
What else do you have to say, sir?
Rubber sole shoes.
Go at it.
All right. We get these crystals in the body, we pressurize them, and just from a very gross physical point of view, we get a bunch of electricity coming out. Now there's a lot of books that have been written over the years where you look at your hair as a little antenna, and you look at your feet as grounding rods. Now what I did was I walked up to this negative ionizer and I started to get a charge on my body, and I was standing there and holding it, and this guy walked up and touched me. Another person walked up and touched me, and I got zapped. And this little blue-violet spark shot off, and I went, oh yeah. And that happened a few times, and then I kept playing with it. I noticed the ones that had their rubber-soled shoes was the ones that was getting a build-up of the charge, because they're insulated. They're not earthed. This was on concrete in this particular situation, which does leak to earth slowly. But you add that with rubber-soled shoes or synthetic carpet, and it gets much stronger. You put an ionizer down on a synthetic surface, they accumulate charges either way, and the ionizer unit has to shut down to stop blowing up, but it has an automatic shutdown. But I've never seen a clearer demonstration of the importance of being grounded electrically, which all animals are pretty much all the time. And if you feel your breathing and then you go out and stand on sand or stand on grass or touch a tree, you'll feel your breathing get deep and your whole body start to relax. And there were some studies done with Waves Forrest, a man in the United States who published the information, some of it, on oxygen and ozone. And he said that in his articles it had been proven scientifically that there's an increased movement of the diaphragm when the body is electrically grounded, and this means that your oxygenation goes up when you're in touch electrically with the earth. Did you get the importance of that, the bottom line? And so these charges of static build up, and at the cellular level that effect is huge. So leather soles seem to leak to earth, but you can't get leather sole shoes that you can exercise in unless you make them yourself. I've been looking. They're really hard to find. Maybe you can down south a little ways in the more alternate areas, and or you need to pay a lot of money. But you can get them, and they leak to earth. Peter says you can thread copper wire through your rubber-soled shoes, and that'll earth it. But you know, animals, the earth takes everything. Lightning comes from the earth, the electrons. It doesn't come from the sky, and so we have a continual energy supply underneath us that we continually cut ourselves off. And there's some studies done, and you look at the rise in the chronic diseases, and then you look at the rise in rubber-soled shoe production since the invention of rubber. And although it's a stretch of the imagination, it's directly proportional. They run up side by side, which is obviously not the only factor, but it's there. You know, I wanted to repeat, with the Chernobyl, your ions are made from the collision of gamma radiation and various things with the atoms in the air. And so since Chernobyl, we've gone to a very positively ionized situation with an excess of positive ions everywhere, plus pollution, and we then have excess large positive ions everywhere, and that's triggering allergies and causing serotonin, mast cell problems in the body with inflammations that aren't responding. And this is all to do with the hypothalamus's regulation of the polarity in the body. But I don't want to go into that.
Any questions? Michael. Comment. Come on up here. Kyle, anything more you want to add there, sir? That's brilliant, isn't it?
Heaps that can be said.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Kyle.
No, it's a comment. It's a little bit of a digression, but I feel that it's relevant to what we're talking about. As a result of years of work by lobbyists from all around the planet, many of them whom are doctors and scientists and other people, tomorrow will begin a court case, a historic court case. The World Health Organization is actually going to the International Court of Justice to try and win a case that will say that nuclear weapons are illegal. And this is the first time that anything like that has ever happened. So that's sort of something positive to add to all this. I feel, I'm a member of Greenpeace, actually I'm a friend of the Rainbow Warrior. I wholeheartedly support Greenpeace, but I think that something that's been moving inside of me all of this year, perhaps a bit longer, is that I really need to start writing letters to politicians saying that people who are involved not just in the nuclear arms industry, but the nuclear power industry, should be treated like criminals. And that's essentially what the World Health Organization are trying to say. But they're beginning with nuclear weapons. But that's a start.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. Now, if you can get some information on that to me, I'd be very grateful.
Well, straight away I can tell you there was an article about a doctor. He's a New Zealand doctor, He died on the 24th of August.
What was his name?
Eric Geiringer. Yes. I read an obituary that was dedicated to him in last Saturday's Australian.
What was the cause of death?
Myeloma. Bone cancer. Some type of bone cancer. But he was involved in an organisation of doctors worldwide that were dedicated to getting the United Nations and the World Health Organisation to actually sort of push to implement this court case in the International Court of Justice. And they decided that that was the best avenue for them to approach this particular action because it's a universal or a worldwide organisation. But it was only after they severely browbeat a lot of politicians and powerful people from all over the world. And of course the people who were most opposed to this court case were the Security Council, all of whom are nuclear powers. And my sense of this whole issue is we definitely have to take care of ourselves and our nutrition and supplement our oxygen, but unless more of us start writing letters to politicians to let them know that we're out there and that we're really concerned about it, you know, I think in a way, I'm not saying that taking care of yourself is a waste of time, but you've got to take positive action. And I see writing letters and talking to politicians that represent us in Parliament as a positive action to take.
Yay! And I want you to know that there are some of us nuclear activists that wear a tie. Okay? I want you to know that. Contrary to what our little Frenchman has to say about the matter. There are many of us who are nuclear activists in our own right and who are also members of Greenpeace and friends of the Greenpeace activity, okay? Now, Anita and I hand out all kinds of pamphlets. You know, we're activists in this anti-nuclear thing. And this is where I really believe that our next fight is going to be, and I fully support what's taking place in this other matter. Let's ban all forms of nuclear energy forever. And perhaps we have a chance to save the race here, because if we don't, then the oxygen deprivation in the Earth's atmosphere will take such precedence that we'll have sweeping disease, sweeping illnesses of all shapes and sizes, increased cancer over what we already have, increased leukemia, and we'll be lucky if we survive. Now that's what I'm seeing now. I still think there's a chance, but I think we're going to have a lot of hard problems before we're able to turn things around and bring things back to a spot where we as citizens of this planet Earth can survive. I don't think it's going to be easy, but we'll sure learn a lot in the process. Okay, now I've been informed it's late for a break. Now why don't you take about a 10 or 15 minute break while it's not raining, and then we'll continue on. Are you having fun? Okay. Okay. When we look at the sclera of the eye, and we have a blue spot in the eye, what I have found is I can't determine the relationship between a spot at the end of a blood vessel or a single blue spot in the sclera of the eye. But what I have found is that the blue spot, if we take that a line into the iris area, we will find a corresponding area of gradual breakdown in the tissues in the area indicated by the positioning of the blue spot. Now, as the body gets worse, Anita, the blue spot moves from a blue spot to a red spot. which appears to be a more serious condition than a blue spot. And then gradually, we turn from a red spot into a brown spot, which appears to be a yet more dangerous position. And here's where we can see clearly, if we take our line in toward the pupil, we can see more clearly a degenerative condition in the iris of the eye. And usually when we then get a black spot, as we have here, can you see that in the back, Steve? And if we get a black spot in the, now this can be either at the end of the blood vessel, or it can be a single black spot in the sclera. This will usually indicate a tumorous condition in the relative area. Now, remember, if this is close to the limbus or the circumference of the iris, that means it's fairly close to the pupil or in the zone 1 or zone 2 area. And this would probably be in the area of the zone 3. And as the spot moves out here, you'd have zone 4, 5, and 6, and 7. The further out it is, the more dangerous the position will be away from the pupil. The further this black spot is away from the circumference of the iris, would move it out into 7 zones further away from the pupil. In other words, if it's close in here, we would find it in zone 1 or 2. This would be about zone 3 or thereabouts. And then we have zone 4, zone 5, 6, and 7, probably in that order. But it goes A, B, C, D in order of progression. It goes from a blue spot here to a red spot to a brown spot, and then finally to your black spot. And that's the progression that I have observed in people as they go down through what we call the disease process, as the body degenerates. Next one, please. Okay, this is a hiatal or hiatus hernia. Now, can you bring that right here? In either one or the other, the right or the left iris, right above that in the sclera at 12 o'clock, if you have a line coming down which spreads out into a fork, that will be a hiatal hernia. Now, that's where there is a herniation in the diaphragm, and a part of this upper part of the stomach moves up through the hole in the diaphragm, up along the esophagus, making a ballooning out above the diaphragm to where when you swallow your pills or your food, it gets stuck right here and can't go down. And then you have to get a little bit of water or bread or something to take that food on down. At night, during the night, you'll have it burp up on you sometimes, and it's just this terribly acid condition that you'll taste in your mouth, and sometimes you nearly choke on it. And it's a very painful, burning sensation down through this particular area. Now, we'll handle next weekend the maneuver that we go through to help out with the hiatal hernia, but you have to use that on a regular basis, and it's only a stopgap measure. But it's a very effective one. But anyway, if you look in the iris, you can see it in one eye or the other, and sometimes it's just a little bit off-center, which would be due to anatomical differences again. Just a little bit off-center here, maybe over here. But when you see this great big fork coming down right about 12 o'clock-ish, that's the indication of your hiatal hernia. And that requires attention. Now, normally when you take your nerve supply and restore that to the body, that herniation in the diaphragm will begin to close up. And this is what happens, because normally when your body is numb and something happens to a hernia, you don't know it's there because it's all numb and it does not go through the healing process. But when the nerve supply and circulation comes back to the body, then that hiatal hernia will heal, and a person will be free of that type of a problem. You're looking at one right here. I used to have that quite bad years ago. Anita, or you Ian, you have it too. Enjoy. Those of us who used to enjoy great big steaks 3 times a day, we suffer. Okay. You like my artwork? Let me show you little problems that we have. If I have one like this right here, very, very close to the limbus, I would probably look clear down close to the pupil for some sort of distortion in the fibers. Now remember, oftentimes if you have a brown eye, the brown, what we call the anterior chromatophores, cover up what's down underneath and you can't see the fibers. If you have a whole lot of mucoprotein down under that brown discoloration, even when the brown discoloration comes off, you still can't see down under the mucoprotein. But let me say one thing. If that mucoprotein, watch my hands, is clear down around the fibers of the iris of the eye, and it's way down inside, it is formed in reverse order. Shall we say the healing crisis is in reverse order to how it was formed, and I want to take a few minutes and go over that with you. If you take a little baby, the little baby's eye is perfectly clear when it's born. It's blue eye. There's no lymphatic rosary, no mucoprotein, but when you put a kid, a little baby, on a protein-type diet rather than goat's milk or mother's milk, then you start seeing that mucoprotein begin to form like little beads in the iris of the eye around the iris in what they call the lymphatic rosary. It's clear. The little beads are sitting clear up anterior on top of the fibers. You got that? Then as the mucoprotein increases, then that mucoprotein begins to drift posterior back down in between the fibers. So after a while, you cannot see the fibers at all, and the mucoprotein becomes a huge cloud which envelops the fibers and goes down and posterior back down toward the pigment layer, and then it moves from around zone 6, which is the lymphatic rosary, and moves into zone 3, and then the whole eye is simply covered with mucoprotein. There's no way you can see the fibers. Now in reverse order, you'll see this on yourself if you have it. First of all, you have it way down in zone 6, you have it down in zone 3. It covers the fibers, you can't see really what's going on, and it's all posterior. As it starts to dissolve, it starts to become anterior until just before all this mucoprotein dissolves and goes away, all of the mucoprotein is sitting up on top of the fibers, way anterior, and then it drifts off into a little cloud over on top of the fibers, and then it's gone, in reverse order to how it formed. It first formed as a cloud, and then drifted into that lymphatic rosary, and then down into the fibers. It comes out exactly in reverse order. Any questions? Now you might say, why am I saying that relative to this? Because if the mucoprotein is there, and yet you can't see what's under it, then we have to revert back to the sclera as an indicator to see what's going on in the iris of the eye, because the brown discoloration or the mucoprotein discoloration covers it all up and you don't know what's going on inside. You follow me? So you have to come and learn how to read this carefully. So this would probably be something somewhere in the intestines, maybe in the colon, probably down in the stomach area, and since you can't see the fibers, you don't know what's going on there. So you have to rely almost entirely on the sclera. Now if I had an enclosure here, this has always, to me, over the last 40-some years, when I began, well actually from from 1980 onward, when I really began putting this together, this material here, this always represents cancer to me. Even it may not be spreading, and it may be terribly localized, and it hasn't been branching out, so to speak, where you have a big bush moving. But this has always indicated to me that we have abnormal tissue that hasn't maybe focalized its growth factor. So this we have to look at. Now you might have that clear back in here. You might have it way up in there. These are real because the vascular system has already developed itself, and the blood vessels are moving into that area, feeding it. So when you see this in the sclera, it's a very active one. You follow me? That you have to take immediate note of. So you follow that down. You understand this now, that you follow this down toward the pupil and get a line in this area through here and find out what actually is taking place. Now, since that is far away, probably the area we have to look at would be up in this area. You follow me? Because of its distance from the edge of the iris, rather than close proximity such as we have here. You follow that? Okay, so this would probably be quite a ways away, so you look in the upper part here, this area. You follow me? Okay, same here. This one here, you look a little closer. This one here, you look a little bit closer in toward the pupil. This one here would be very close to the pupil. This would be out maybe a little past the zone 3. Zone 3 is zone 4. Yes, Ian? Could you come up here, please, and just speak your piece so we get you on record?
My question is, the more lines on an enclosure, does that make the degeneration at a more advanced state?
I think so. Like this.
Yep.
And like this. Here you have some serious problems. And you can have just a tiny little dot. Now, if that tiny little dot is in line with the pineal or the pituitary, and you have a black spot in the pituitary and the pineal gland, we have a serious matter that needs immediate attention. Okay? Let me put it to you very carefully. If I have a malignant melanoma on my skin, how long does it take that to find pay dirt, so to speak, with the death of the individual? If you have a malignant melanoma, what would a medical doctor tell you? Get it out. Why? Because it's moving. And a melanoma you don't mess with, because it's like a black mole on your body. And I have found with the herb veil, putting that on the skin, on your black mole, which Steve has that, it works beautifully on pulling those cancers out. But some of those so-called skin cancers, which are a big black mole, you get about sometimes 2 or 3 cups of garbage out of them, and a great big crater. And these are things we cannot fool with. You follow me? So don't just look in the iris of the eye. Also look at the physical structure of the body, and then realize that the black pigmentation on the skin is a sign of degeneration. And even though there's no pain there, it is a problem looking for a place to happen, and that mole can start scaling off, bleeding, growing, and the thing is, get rid of it while it's there. Yes, sir. Herb Veil 8. It's used by a clinic in Auckland for skin cancers where they have been 100% effective on working with skin cancers. The gal's name is Val Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. She has an office there on Queen Street at the present time. But you can purchase a tub of this material from the Altered States at 4 Grundy Street in Auckland. What? Gundry Street, G-U-N-D-R-Y. 4 Gundry Street. Yes? Steve has it here. I think Steve has a tub of it. Okay? Now, yes, sir.
Quick one. If you just nick a green pawpaw with your nail and take the white sap out and put a dab of that on your skin cancer, I've seen them fall off in 2 days and have fresh pink skin growing underneath.
Yes, that's on the skin cancer, but how about a melanoma?
I don't know that.
Okay.
You can use it while your herb valete's arriving.
Good idea. And that will happen. The skin cancers peel right off with the protease in the papain form. Now, with this right here, you make doggone good and sure you're on the full program, and don't just be satisfied with a few enzymes and a few bit of minerals. You can't play with these. You've got to go heavy, heavy, heavy program to turn this sort of thing around before it gets a hold on your body. Okay? Now, next. All right? Oftentimes you see these little yellowish deposits in the sclera, and you find a lot of these. You like a little fatty deposits. These are little cholesterol deposits, which usually you will find with people who are heavy, heavy meat eaters. They'll have a lot of clusters of this particular fatty material just around 3 o'clock and or 9 o'clock in the sclera of the eye. Next. Yes, sir. We're not there yet, I don't think. We'll get to that. Okay. Here's this. Pull this over, Anita. To the right. There we are. When you have horizontal red lines in the brain area, that's between 11 and 1 o'clock in both scleras, in both right and left sclera. Bring that down, please. Way up in this area, you'll see all kinds of different figures of horizontal lines like this. And the person can't think. They have short-term memory loss. You will find that these people are being continually ongoing exposed to toxic fumes. You'll find people that work in cabinet shops where they have various lacquers and paints and one thing or another will have that. You'll find people that work with marine glues and they're down in the boat building business. They'll all have that. You find people that work on, in places where you have chemical toxicity in the atmosphere. They'll all have that. But this is where the stuff evidently is able to pass through the blood-brain barrier, pass into the brain, and you'll see those horizontal red lines in this area. Even if you have a gas leak in your home, you will have that if you have a gas leak, because gas in itself is a petrochemical, okay, and it's toxic to the body. Any question there? You have gas station attendants that are continually exposed to petrol fumes. They will have these. Linda? Just cleanse the body, and then those horizontal lines will go away, but you have to turn off the tap somewhere and keep yourself in a position where you're not exposed to those fumes. Yes? I don't know. I haven't seen that. I don't know. That's a pretty toxic chemical. I remember I had a very nice pair of pants one time in the chemistry lab, and I sat down in a pool of the stuff that somebody had spilt, and I became very warm in my rear end, and my pants dropped off. That sulfuric acid is very, very powerful. I had a hole back there. There was nothing left but the derriere exposed, and that was quite insulted, shall we say, by that which I couldn't get rid of. But that sulfuric acid is terribly toxic. Okay, Anita, next. All right. Now this is allergy lines. Now you have a lot of people They're always sniffing around. They're always having drainage from their sinuses. They get exposed to a little bit of pollen in the wind, and they start coughing and sneezing and having all kinds of allergic reactions. Now, you look at the sclera of the eye, and you'll see a multitude of little, tiny, short lines, oftentimes mishmashed all the way through here, that go up right into the limbus and sometimes over the edge of the iris, where the sclera is pulled up over the edge, where you have kind of a lack of nerve supply to the body. And you'll have these, but all these little things will be moved up over the edge of the iris. This will be an allergy. These are definitely allergy lines. Now, when you see the allergy lines, you look at two things primarily, but not limited to those two things. The first one will be the liver, because oftentimes this is an indication of a toxicity in the liver, as well as the intestines and the colon, which usually need to have a good colonic irrigation on a regular basis, because the toxins in the colon are absorbed by the colon and go out into the body, and all of the enzymes and minerals are being used to detoxify that toxic reaction. And so you have to remove the source of the toxicity with some good, solid colonic therapy. And I would recommend, after you get the cecum dump properly administered, which sometimes takes a while, then maybe one good colonic a month to get those toxins completely out of the system, so that these lines will then disappear in the sclera. But the thing is, if your whole body is toxic, you're not going to heal. And that colon sometimes is terribly toxic. And down here in the cecum area, you have literally a cesspit of toxins there that will continue poisoning the body until that is removed through a colonic therapy. I don't know how else to get it in any guaranteed manner. Yes, sir. Simon.
Does that go the same for children as well? I know some people whose kids have got continually runny noses and they're allergic to just about everything. Is that the same for children? They have these problems in the colon?
Are the children constipated from time to time? You have to check that out, because if there's constipation involved, then even at a very early age you can have terrible constipation. And it would certainly impact the cecum. Now, if you do have bad breath, or if you have a lot of, shall we say, swelling or pain in the small intestine area, and your small intestine area is always extended and swollen type of thing, then oftentimes here's where the toxic area in the cecum needs immediate attention, and get a good cecum dump from that. Because as long as you have an impacted cecum, it'll hold, by stretching the colon wall, it'll hold open the anterior lip of the ileocecal valve, and that way all of the toxins from the colon move back up into the small intestines, kill the acidophilus that's there, and you have bloating and pain and distension of the small intestine area, and it's a very painful situation. Any question on that? Yes. Come on up here, please, on that. And then John Bruniges, would you prepare for a lecture on the subject?
Would you suggest a colonic irrigation for children at a certain age?
Yes, they have little scopes there that you can insert in the rectum and give a very good colonic irrigation even to children. In fact, sometimes the children need them. They have a little proctoscope that works just beautifully there. Ian.
John, when Gloria and I were in the States, we both noticed after we had a meal there that we had an instant, instant swelling of the area you just described. We didn't notice it in Australia, but eating the food in America, is there a relationship in what you're saying?
I don't know what really the diet in the States, if you are in the fast food industry, is extremely fried foods, lots and lots of fats and lots of sugars. And you won't feel good eating those diets. John, would you come? This is the left eye. This is your descending colon. If there happens to be scar tissue opposite the breast here, in this area where it's dented in toward the pupil, we know for sure that there's going to be a lack of nerve supply going out into that area, and I can guarantee you that this part of the body will not heal until that scar tissue in this area is resolved, and that's through point holding. Now, if you have other problems in this area, which could be simply due to a toxic buildup through, shall we say, diverticulitis, or a bowel pocket of one type or another, and then that in turn will reflex out, keeping this breast from healing. And that breast is only one area. It could be for any other part of the body. If a person has, for example, pinworms that are up the rectum, where people are, a lot of kids are always itching the rectum, those are usually pinworms. And during about a couple of days before full moon and a couple of days after full moon, you can take a little piece of tape and you put it across the rectum there, pull it off, you see all these little bugs, little worms there, pinworms, attached to that tape. Sometimes you see the eggs attached to it too. But that pinworms will be right in this area, causing scarring, and then the toxins in the body will settle out in the tissue of greatest weakness, causing this area here to be pigmented, and you follow that pigmented right out here and you hit the kidney adrenal area on what John has said. And John has made it very clear that in this area he's never seen a kidney problem that wasn't related back to the colon. Now, Anita, can I have the other side, please, of the Jensen? Okay, now on the other one for the kidney, supporting John's statement, here's the cecum area, and this is that cesspit of toxins I was telling you about. When this is all toxic and you're not able to get a normal peristaltic action down here to clean that out, this whole area will reflex to the pancreas, and hypoglycemia, diabetes will result from that. In this area, adrenal problems and kidney problems will result from that. Yeah, are you with me on this? Now, this is why that colon is so doggone important to keep clean, squeaky clean. Michael. John, you stay up here. I want you to ask any questions that you might have concerning this matter, because this is, the allergy lines will not go away until that colon has been taken care of properly. Michael.
I have a question about strictures in the colon.
Yes, sir?
If you're having a colonic and you have a stricture, is it possible that the stricture may prevent the water from circulating as far as the cecum, for instance?
There could be a possibility, but it's more likely to be that a build-up of gas is what stops the water going through. The stricture is usually not that... Sorry. The stricture is usually not so tight that we cannot get the water through, because we are stimulating the water. We'll stimulate the water at the stricture, and it'll usually let some through, but it wouldn't be perfect.
Okay, moving along.
I love that, moving along. That's a very appropriate statement, Michael.
All right. Obviously, you want to get rid of the stricture. Do colonics assist with that?
Definitely.
And
would you repeat that question, please?
Do colonics assist with helping heal or move strictures out?
And the answer?
Definitely.
And I say definitely to that too, because at one time I was full of strictures in my colon area because I had severe constipation up until about the age of 50. And when I had colonic irrigation, as the strictures removed themselves and disappeared, I had the most god-awful pains in my gut when I had a colonic that I ever had, more so than point holding. And that can happen. And so you can't say that colonic therapy properly done isn't going to be painful. If you've got problems there and you go through a healing crisis, you're going to have pain which is more, shall we say, more painful than your awareness was than when you had your constipation. Michael?
And the other side of that is point holding would assist healing strictures or moving them.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then again, you look at the 12th thoracic vertebrae for a calcification there, which gets the nerve supply basically into the small intestine, and the first lumbar vertebrae, which helps you get the blood supply, nerve supply into the large intestine. So there's also spinal effort that you have to deal with to dissolve those calcifications so that you can restore the nerve supply to that area.
Okay.
So it can heal.
Strictures, are they related to flatulence?
I would say
and
definitely
poor digestion.
Yes, because it keeps the stuff held back so it goes into a fermentation process wherein you have gas released.
Right. And one last question. You were speaking before about pinworms. Are they different to threadworms?
No, the threadworms are very long, skinny things. The pinworms are just very, very small.
Right.
Very small, but very itchy.
So, okay, well, there are a number of these proprietary brands of threadworm. What do you call them? Yeah, there is some kind of insecticidal thing, or yeah, Combantrin's one.
Just remember, you only have 2 worms at a time to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
They're called parasites.
Yeah. Okay. Parasites. Okay. I know someone who's got a chronic case of threadworm, and tried herbs and Combantrin and all sorts of things. They keep on coming back.
The worms will not stay in a body which is aerobic. And as your body becomes aerobic, then the worms will do everything they can to get out in the nearest exit. And what they will do, they can come out through the skin, come out through the nose, come out through the eyes, out of the throat and mouth, and out certainly out of the rectum area. And when these things start coming out on a person who has a good case of worms, you start oxygenating the body and the worms have to leave. They cannot remain in an oxygenated environment. Now when that goes out to the cells, they come right out through the skin. And you can just see them. You pick them out with tweezers as they come out of your skin. So this oxygen is terribly important in this day and age to rid the body of any parasitic invasion which may be there due to oxygen deprivation.
Okay, thanks.
That helps. That'll keep things moving along. John, anything else you want to say, sir? Phone number?
Oh, I've got a lot of brochures if anyone likes to take one from me. The thing that I forgot to mention is that while the colonic irrigation is going on, when we release the water and let it run out, it runs straight into the sewer, but there's a glass viewing tube, and we watch what comes out, and that tells us a lot as to the texture of the fecal matter or undigested food matter, the gas. There's 2 types of gas. Methane, which is the natural digestion gas, comes out, and then there's fermentation gas, so we can tell the difference of what's going on inside as well.
By the way, do you know who you're talking to here? This is the president, the new president of the Australian Stool Watchers Society. Okay, Ian.
I would just like to add my little bit to what both Johns are saying. I was introduced to colonics about 12 years ago and have had lots of colonics. And what they say about the pain is spot on. You lie there and you're feeling quite comfortable, and all of a sudden you get this excruciating pain. You feel like you want to run to the toilet and blow it to pieces. But what actually happens was you... I got it. That you find that there's something comes along through the tube, as John has just said. You can see it coming out. So pain for gain, I guess.
John.
Just one more point too is that under the method of irrigation we use, we mix pure medical oxygen with the water. So you're also getting oxygen into the colon, which will help. It helps the parasites and makes it more aerobic. And some of that oxygen is absorbed into the bloodstream as well.
And it helps to eliminate the toxins so you're not suffering continually from auto-intoxication. It's very, very important. Anita? What number are we on there? We should be about 25 or 6. 26. We're right halfway through. It's after 6 o'clock, so frankly, we're right on time. And I tried to tell you that hopefully would keep you here till 6, but not much later. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Are there any announcements from any of you before we close? Anybody? Okay, we'll start roughly at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Rob, anything more you want to say about wholesale prices on the films?